Welcome to our 1 in 3 autoethnography. Here we discuss our lived experiences with mental illness. My name's Steven.
And my name's Levi. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance the understanding of mental illness in order to help break the stigma that surrounds them. We will do this by sharing stories of our symptoms to individualize them.
And it's important to note that we are not medical professionals. Please contact your doctor if you're concerned about your mental well-being. This content should not be interpreted as medical advice.
Hello, everyone. On this podcast so far, we have talked about numerous symptoms of our mental illness, such as impulsivity and time blindness, and how those have shown themselves in our lives. We have also spoken on some of our coping mechanisms and on self-compassion and self-love. I think now that we have introduced these topics and spoken on some of the aspects they affect in our lives, that it is a good time to speak about medication. I wanted to talk on medication because of the stigma surrounding medication use and the use of medication in treating mental illness that I observed in one of my classes. So I don't really want to call anybody out or anything like that, and I don't want to be rude to anyone or anything like that, but because everyone's at a different level in their education and everything like that, and everyone has different personal experiences. But I do feel that it is necessary to answer some of the questions they brought up because they are common questions and they do directly relate to some of the stigma surrounding medication usage. So, Steven, would you care to explain how your medications work?
Okay, so I definitely agree with you that there's a lot of stigma surrounding medication. So I was on antidepressants for a little bit, as you might know. I was on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which is a class of antidepressants. And the way they work is that they just stop neurotransmitters from being reabsorbed by neurons. So instead of increasing the amount of serotonin in your brain, which is like a happy chemical basically, you prevent it from being reabsorbed, and that theoretically helps with stuff like anxiety and depression. The way that ADHD medication works is it's a stimulant. So your brain is basically just going to produce more dopamine. And theoretically, one of the root causes of ADHD is a lack of dopamine. And yeah, that's basically it. I have no idea how lamotrigine works, which is my bipolar medication, but what medication are you on?
I'm on stimulant medication. I'm on Vyvanse currently, and I believe you're on the same.
Yeah, I am on Vyvanse.
And yeah, Vyvanse is lisdextrameth. It's lisdexamphetamine, which it is an amphetamine, so it is a stimulant, right? And but it's also a prodrug. It's basically attached to this other large organic molecule. So you have your amphetamine attached to another organic molecule, and then in your liver you have enzymes that cleaves this apart, and so it lasts all day, and it's a slow release of amphetamine, which provides our brains the correct amount of dopamine.
And that's a distinction between something like methamphetamine and why this is a completely different drug. Because I know a lot of people are like, oh, if you put a kid on stimulant medication, you're basically like hopping them up on meth, which isn't true at all.
Yes, there's also a big distinction between methamphetamine and amphetamine. It's organic chemistry, right? But there's a big difference. It's only one methane group different. It's just one carbon with 3 hydrogens attached. But this makes a big difference in how it affects our brains and everything like that. So you aren't going to see as great of a surge of dopamine or anything like that with amphetamine compared to methamphetamine as well.
Mm-hmm. So basically you're not hopping your kids on meth.
No.
I'm going to mention it again that people with ADHD they speculate that one of the causes of it is a lower level of dopamine, which is observed in people with ADHD. So it's going to make sense that stimulant medication is going to calm people down with ADHD, basically, and help them focus. So now that we covered how medication works, or the ones that we are on, do you think you would be where you are today without your medication, Levi?
I really don't think I would be where I'm at today. Currently, I said I'm taking Vyvanse, and I'm taking it at 50 milligrams in the morning. And so, with Vyvanse, it's a slow release, right? Your liver has to process it, so it will last my entire workday. So, I've shared some of the stories of us being unmedicated, like in episode 3 with the lotion wars and everything. But some of the other symptoms, other than impulsivity, that I struggled with when I was unmedicated, and even now that I'm medicated, are like with ADHD, it's common to see attention problems, and I do have attention problems even now that I'm medicated. And I also have motivation problems. It's hard to find the drive to get myself to do work. It's like I'll be sitting here at my table or in front of my laptop, and it's like there's a wall between me and whatever I need to do. I can't do what I have to do. Sometimes I physically can't do it, and other times it's like I have to overcome this mental barrier, Like, well, I guess it's all really mentally, but sometimes it feels like physical. Something's physically holding me back. But I also have problems with my working memory, and that affects my schoolwork in that I really can't do mental math that well. I can do like simple addition, or I struggle with subtraction in my head. I like to write it out or use it on a calculator, because for people with ADHD, our working memory is impaired, so we can't hold as many things in our head. So me thinking, okay, I have this math problem here, I have to subtract 10 and then add 2x, and trying to do that in my head is really difficult.
You're struggling with subtracting 10 from things?
It was my first example.
Okay, sorry.
But I'll give a specific example of my math then. I'm doing linear algebra, and I have to subtract matrices. And
what the hell? Matrices?
Or multiply matrices together. And it's really difficult for me to do these things without fully writing them out. And matrices are just, it's a simpler expression of a linear system. And a linear system is a group of linear equations.
It sounds like a made-up word, but anyway.
Yeah, so when I'm on my medication, I'm able to overcome or deal with, or even if I can't deal with, it lessens my symptoms, right? It makes them easier on me and on my mental health and on my life. And so with my medication, I'm able to, do my schoolwork. I'm able to go to the gym and work out, and that helps with my ADHD as well. And I'm able to remember to eat more healthy, and remember to do my therapy and everything like this. And so I've run out of my medication before, or I've taken tolerance breaks, even though you don't really have to. But and so when I do this without my medication, I really see an uptick in these symptoms, and it's like I'm back to square one. It's like I haven't even been on this journey at all, And so I don't think that without my medication I would be where I am today. I don't know where I would be, but I don't even think I'd be in university, honestly.
You wouldn't be in university making up words.
They weren't made up. I will tell my math teacher on you.
Yeah, tell him to email me.
Okay, I will. Yeah, so anyways. So Steven, without your medication, do you think you would be here?
Like here right now?
Yeah, here right now, or where are you at today?
In my room on a Zoom call at 8:30, barely awake. I definitely don't think I would be here. Like, I don't think I would be in university, and I don't think, well, that's a little bit morbid, but I think I would have struggled a lot more with suicide. To start, I was on antidepressants, which is the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. That's a hard word to say. We're saying a lot of made up words today. But anyway, I was on antidepressants for a little bit, and those aren't great with people who are who have bipolar type 2 or bipolar type 1. So they drove me into hypomania, and I basically just didn't feel great on them. Like, I don't want to say I felt like a zombie, a lot more numb. And after a little while, my doctor diagnosed me with ADHD. At first, it was just anxiety. So, well, I don't want to say just anxiety, but just anxiety without any other illnesses. So, after that medication, I started taking Dexedrine, and then from there I moved to Vyvanse, and I struggle a lot with regulating my attention and motivation. Basically, without my medication, I know I can't get anything done without having like an hour or two of a wind up, if that makes sense. It's like I have that same wall in front of me when I want to do a task, and it's just difficult without medication to get over that, to actually start something. And I have a hard time focusing in general. And definitely my impulsivity is a lot better on medication. So I would definitely say, in my experience, it was like putting on glasses, and for the first time I could see in my life. It's like my brain was clear, if that makes sense. It's not like this little pinball that's bouncing around like a little dopamine sinking missile. I could focus, and I felt a little less impulsive. I could basically just do things that I couldn't do before, if that makes sense.
It's also, I wear glasses, and yeah, that's a good analogy. It's really eye-opening, really, when...
I get it. Glasses. Eye-opening. You're hilarious.
Yeah. You see what I did? Anyways, yeah. It's, at least for me and you, at least, and I think for other people with ADHD I've talked to, when you first start your medication, it's a really noticeable difference, unlike with SSRIs, which take 2 to 3 weeks to build up a working level in your system.
Yeah, it can be a lot more than 2 to 3 weeks as well.
Yeah, stimulant medication is instant, right? And you can instantly see the benefits of your medication.
Even if you started on lower dosage.
Yeah. I started at 30 milligrams Vyvanse when I switched to Vyvanse, and now I'm at 50 milligrams, and it's working with your doctor, right, to get the right dosage and everything. And yeah, even when I was at 30, I could see a noticeable difference compared to unmedicated and my last medication even.
Like I said before, it's your mind actually feels clear, like everything feels right, if that makes sense. I don't know a better way to describe it other than that.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, really. When I first started when I got my diagnosis, I was also on medication that wasn't great for me, and I had spoken with my doctor about this, and it's common practice at the university here to start ADHD medication with Concerta, and I started on Concerta, and Concerta is methylphenidate, and that's what Ritalin is, right? So I found it really wasn't good for me, and it gave me really, really terrible migraines. And I had talked to my girlfriend about this quite a few times, but she said she can see a noticeable difference between me now and me when I was on Concerta, because my when I was on Concerta, it caused me to fall into a really depressive mood, and it wasn't working well. It didn't help my symptoms that well. And I just want to say that this is okay. And just because one medication didn't work for me, it doesn't mean it won't work for everyone. And I again want to emphasize that if you are on medication and you think you aren't at the right dosage, or you aren't seeing a difference in what it's supposed to change, then you should speak with your doctor and find something that does work for you, and that no treatment for mental illness is going to be a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most important thing is that you're transparent with your doctor. Like, you should tell them stuff like you're in a very depressive mood, because that's very important information. Like, I know one of the things that I didn't want to do because of my anxiety was telling my doctor that the medication wasn't great. So I stayed on, what was it called? Duloxetine. I stayed on duloxetine for 4 or 5 months because I was anxious about telling my doctor that it wasn't great for me, which is weird. But I also forgot to mention that I'm also on lamotrigine, which takes like months to titrate. And once it was at a working level, I noticed that my mood swings were a lot easier to control. And when I was hypomanic, or when I become hypomanic, it's a lot easier to manage. So yeah, it definitely took a bunch of trial and error to get to where I am. I think I cycled through 5 types of ADHD. No, not 5. 3 or 4 types of ADHD medication and a bunch of other stuff. I think it's essential to my daily living. Do you think that you could ever go off your medication someday?
I'm uncertain about that. ADHD isn't something that just affects your academic life. It's a global condition. And so it affects every aspect of my life. Like we've been talking about it affects our friendships, it affects our relationships, it affects our self-talk, everything like that. And
it affects our podcast because our hosts always like to interrupt each other.
Yeah. But at the same time, if I found something that I really love, when you really love something, at least I find with my ADHD, I'm still able to focus, and I'm even able to hyper focus on it and not get burnt out as bad,
Yeah, it's like you can, when you become passionate about something with ADHD, you're going to dedicate like all your time and energy to it. It's great to see sometimes, but it can also be quite unhealthy.
Yeah. At the same time, even if I did find something I really loved that I wanted to work at for the rest of my life, I'm not sure that without my medication, I would be able to deal with, say, the stress of the job or meeting deadlines or anything like that. So it really depends on my future, But I don't think that I would really personally, because I find it enables me and helps me so much that there's no reason to. Would you ever stop either one of your medications?
I just want to make the distinction that I can stop taking my bipolar medication, but I choose to stay on it. The way I would describe taking medication is it's analogous with using crutches, right? Like Levi and I are talking a lot about focus and our mood and the way we interact in relationships, right? So if you imagine a normal person I shouldn't say a normal person, imagine a neurotypical, and they're lined up for a race, and this race could be anything. Like, it could be focus or completing a task on time. So they're here at the starting line. And then someone who has ADHD, they could be like 100 meters or even more behind. They could be running backwards. They have crutches and they're already behind. So if you were to have this race, the people who have ADHD would fall behind. And it's not their fault if they didn't know they were using crutches, which would be really weird. Then they would blame themselves for not being able to finish the race at the same time as a neurotypical. But the way the medication would work is that it brings someone with ADHD to the same starting point, right? So instead of being like 100 meters behind, you'll be lined up with someone with a neurotypical, which means the race is fair. So a lot of people have that misconception that stimulant medication is going to be an advantage in school. But no, it brings you up to the baseline, up to the starting point of the race, rather than anywhere past it. If you were a neurotypical and you took it, it'd be like taking steroids so that you could perform better in the race. But that's why I don't want to go off my medication, because I like that it brings me up to my baseline, because I can manage that, right? I know that off my medication, I can't manage it because I get frustrated that I'm starting so far behind. So while it wouldn't be impossible per se, it would be a lot more challenging for, I don't want to say for no reason, but for no reason.
I wouldn't say medication is a crutch, though.
Well, no, I'm not saying medication is a crutch. I'm saying, like, prior to the race, you have something that's inhibiting you. So it could be like a limp. And then medication would be something that's like taking the crutches away or fixing your limp somehow, which doesn't make sense. But
okay, yeah, I understand.
And if you're already behind, you're going to be so much more frustrated. And if you don't know that you have a limp or crutches, you're going to blame yourself for not performing as well as a neurotypical. You're going to wonder what's wrong with you. You're going to be trying to put more effort in. But no matter what, if you have a limp or crutches, you aren't going to run at the same speed as a neurotypical. And that's okay. But that's my experience off medication.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now that we have talked about our prescription medications here, I also want to talk about other things that we do in our lives, such as, we had an episode on routine making. I know we both also try and exercise regularly and eat healthier, or trying to eat healthier. You always say I need to eat more vegetables, and sometimes I do. And all of the other therapy type things that we do or that are suggested to help with our mental health. And I know we really see these suggestions with depression, like if you're depressed, it's good to exercise and go outside and everything like that. But they can also really help with other mental illnesses as well. And they also apply to neurotypical people who are struggling with their mental health. And I just want to make this distinction now that I seen this idea, and it really pertains to this because it was basically everyone has mental health, but not everyone has a mental illness. And it's not a bad thing, to be neurotypical or anything like that. And oftentimes I would love to be neurotypical. So, in your opinion, do you think these alternative type approaches like exercise or going outside could have helped you deal with your depression when you were depressed? Or even now, with or without your medication?
Before I answer that, I want to talk a little bit more about that distinction. You were saying that mental health and mental illnesses aren't the same. So the way that works is that mental health is basically the state of your well-being inside your little head brain here, or your big head brain in Levi's case, massive, but it's your state of health, right? So if we're talking about it like physical health, you could have someone who's healthy, right? Like they're able to walk, they can do regular things, like, yeah, they basically can just do regular things. Their state of health is good. And someone with an illness, they could be like a diabetic or have a limp or something, and you treat that with medication, right? But the distinction is that mental health isn't mental illness. Mental illness has an effect on mental health, right? But they're completely two different concepts.
It's like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs.
Wait, are thumbs fingers?
Yes.
I thought they were thumbs. I honestly don't know how that works. I would Google it, but I think this is more important. Okay. So, in terms of using natural in terms of using natural remedies, I definitely think that they are effective. They've been proven effective. You can look at studies in like the Canadian report card for physical activity. I think that's what it's called. But you can look at that and you can see that there are children who are more physically active are going to have a better time regulating their emotions and regulating their focus. And they could see that difference in neurodiverse individuals as well. So there's so many studies out there, there's so much information that says natural remedies work. And yeah, they do. They're great. If you can integrate them into your routine, they're great. They help you control mental illnesses and they're good for your mental health. However, this is a big however. If you're already behind and you're having difficulty starting something, like say I was in a depressive mood, I don't think I would be able to eat healthy. I don't think I would be able to exercise. If I wasn't on my medication, then chances are my mental illness would have an effect on my mental health that day, because I wouldn't be able to use these natural remedies, which are great. They work. But without medication, it's like I wouldn't even go to the start line, right? Like I wouldn't show up to the race. That's the analogy. Do you think that natural treatment would work for you without medication?
Without my medication, I think not entirely. I know even when we were both unmedicated and undiagnosed, we got really into rock climbing there, for like 2 solid months, and then when we came back to university too.
Because we watched one documentary, The Dawn Wall, on Netflix. It's great.
Yeah. But at the same time, this didn't help me because we had this really big rock climbing obsession, and it felt really good. And when I went climbing or when I worked out, I felt better. I was better able to manage the depressive mood I was in and the alcoholism we were suffering from at that time. I was definitely, I felt better and I was more able to control these things. But at the same time, I impulsively did things because of my ADHD to farther my obsession with rock climbing rather than, say, doing my schoolwork. I would climb for 6 hours that day, or rather than eating lunch, I'd go to the gym and go rock climbing, Like, I would do unhealthy things, and then it got to the point where I suffered bad tendon injuries from this because I was overworking my body and doing all these different things because I knew it felt good when I did this, so I would do it more and more and more and more to try and help deal with my depression more and everything like that, and because of my ADHD and my impulsivity. And I really hurt my tendons in my arms, and they're just now starting to fully heal and not hurt now. Like, I used to have crippling pain in my arms, like you knew this.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing with like passion and ADHD. That's why I'm saying it can be unhealthy sometimes. When you find something that just brings you that surge of dopamine, you're going to be clinging onto it for dear life. Like, you're going to be focusing all your energy into that because it's going to feel great. It's like that feeling when you pick up a new video game, when you start exercising in a certain way, or just find a new obsession. Like for me, it was this podcast. I spend hours looking into like microphone techniques, editing, writing scripts, like going over every episode, like spending hours editing, like so much effort. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the passion. But you can see that it starts to interfere with school, it starts to interfere with life. But eventually that surge of dopamine leaves. And that can be the same in relationships. After a while, it leaves. And then you just don't want to do that thing anymore. You don't want to go back to that hobby. So, while hyperfocus can be good, it's not good at the same time. But anyway, we were still talking about, would you be able to handle your life basically without medication?
Yeah. I also, like, I've been speaking to a therapist and everything like that, and I have done my own research into non-medication strategies for ADHD. And this past summer, I've said this before, I went tree planting, and I suffered from pretty bad symptoms of, what's it called? Rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and I felt really isolated and everything, and this made me depressed. And even though I was medicated, I was outside in the sun working a physical job, maybe too physical, damaging my body, but it felt good. I really enjoyed the work aspect of it. I didn't enjoy the social aspect of it at the beginning until I overcame my symptoms. But even though I would try and, say, journal or practice proper mindfulness or anything like that, I would still suffer from these symptoms even on my medication. So they help. I know I would have been worse if I didn't have these alternative type therapies, but they definitely weren't the best, They weren't saving my life. My medication was,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing with mental health and mental illness, is recognizing that sometimes one aspect, one treatment is going to be more effective than something else at a certain point in time. That doesn't mean that therapy or mindfulness isn't going to be good in a different scenario. But this certain scenario, tree planting, it didn't work great for you, right? So if you weren't on your medication, it would just be a lot worse.
It would have been hell.
Yeah, not that it wasn't.
Yeah. But, yeah, so without my medication, I don't think, even knowing all these different strategies to deal with it, I don't think I would be able to function as I do now, I should say. So I know they're good, and I'm not saying they aren't good or anything like that, but medication is a very important tool in our toolbox, and these are also other important tools. But it really depends on the individual, right? If someone finds that they can really function well just doing these other natural therapies, that is great for them. but they should not try and force others to do this if the other people know that this won't work for them. It all depends on the individual, right? And we should accept people as individuals and understand that some individuals do need medication to function, or some of them don't, and that's fine.
Yeah, like everyone's scenario is unique. There's not a one size fit all. So like you said, there's certain people who are going to respond better to certain medication. Which, if you start your mental health journey and you find out that you have a mental illness, or you're still in that journey as Levi and I are, there's going to be a point where you're going to be asked if you want to start medication. And it's really important to recognize that that's a choice. You aren't going to be forced to start taking medication. And you work with your doctor to find something that works for you. So I know that the most common experience, anecdotally, is that the first batch, the first little while, it's going to be rough because you have to find the right combination. And that's just a part of it. Like, it doesn't mean the treatment's not exactly effective, but it does mean that you're trying and you might get there. But without this tool in your toolbox, everything else is just more difficult. While it helps, it's hard to do certain things. Like, if I'm depressed, I'm not going to be eating. I'm not going to be exercising. I'm not going to be able to talk to people, which are all great things when I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm. Your medication, when you're depressed, your medication, and it allows you to, it helps you really overcome some of the challenges you're facing.
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be a completely separate episode about medications and eating, but I find that a lot of my medication, or my stimulant medication, makes it hard to eat. So there's side effects. Like, Levi and I have been talking a lot about how medication is good, basically, or it's helpful. But you have to recognize that there's also side effects, like sexual impotency, if that's the correct word, and not being able to sleep sometimes, insomnia, and just a host of a lot of other things. So it's not just no risk, right? And that's why a lot of people might be scared. They're like, if I start this medication, I'm going to be a different person. Like, in your experience, how do you think, or do you think you changed as a person when you started your medication?
I know when I started my medication, we had this conversation. I'm not sure if you remember it, but I started my medication and I was worried that I was going to be a different person. And at times I do feel like a different person. Like, I don't have those random eccentric energy bursts now. I don't act the same or talk the same, really. But I'm not changed. What's changed is that I'm able to control my symptoms, right? And so it was really a question of, does my ADHD define me as a person? Is that my personality, these symptoms of ADHD, or is my personality something else? And that really started this own kind of who am I, like, questioning in my head, and sort of made me question my identity in some ways. But at the end of the day, I still think I'm relatively the same, but I think I'm healthier, really.
Mm-hmm. It's like self-actualization, being able to recognize that some things are just symptoms, parts of your mental illness. If you're okay with that, then, that's you. It's a part of who you are. If you like that and you don't want to change it, that's okay. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But in my experience, I don't want to say it's like the same thing. Some of the things that I guess I liked about ADHD are that I felt a lot more funny because I was impulsive. But in that episode, we also talked about how, or in episode 3, we talked about how impulsivity affects our lives. Like, these symptoms aren't black and white, right? And medication isn't black and white. It's not one thing is greater than the other. But my personality, who I am, is the same fundamentally at the core. That's actually something I had to work on in therapy once I started this medication, because I was like, life is just so different now, right? Like, I don't find that I'm struggling as much, so I had to find out like who I was, basically.
In some ways, it's like ego death, right? It's seeing your personality and who you are change and sort of crumble in your own eyes, right? It's seeing this version of yourself that you thought you were and seeing, wow, that's really just my symptoms. That's not really me. That's the symptoms of my mental illness expressing themselves. And
through you.
yeah, and I know that when I started medication, and even now, I feel less confident in a way, because I did used to say a lot of weird things, and I used to own those things, and I used to say and do a lot of weird stuff and not be ashamed of it. But
Lick your knee.
oh, I was thinking the potato I ate out of the toilet tank in first year.
The sink food?
Or the sink food. Yeah, I ate sink food. That's gross. That's not something to be proud of.
After you wash your my favorite thing after washing the dishes is having that little snack in your drain.
Yeah. I still can't believe I just picked it up out of the drain and like chewed on it.
I can't believe that either.
Hey, you shotgun Red Bulls.
Well, yeah, I guess. It's like, yeah, I like the way you put it. It's like the illness is portraying itself through you. Like, rather than being who you are, it's like causing you to do certain things. So once you take that out, once you separate it, mental health and mental illness, you're like, who is Levi or who is Steven, right? Because you've been living so long thinking that you're this impulsive, funny person who's just, like the class clown, basically. And the way I want to put it, or the way I put it now, is like trying to figure out what to do once the party is over. It was like certain things are great, but at the end of the day, I would just be upset, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely understand. It's also a question of what is the distinction between our symptoms and our personality? Where does that stop, or how do our symptoms affect our personality? Because I know that if I didn't grow up as an impulsive, strange, weird teenager and child, that I would not have some of the interests I do today. I wouldn't be as interested in certain hobbies or even I might not even be interested in biochemistry, right? But it's hard to see where that line is, and it's hard to see where or how our symptoms have affected who we are truly, who we actually are, not just them portraying themselves through us.
Exactly. Is it time to talk about Theseus's ship?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question.
You know what I'm talking about, right? With mental illness, like, once you separate it, it's like, is it the same ship? I would say, oh god, no, it's not time to talk about philosophy. It's 9 a.m.
Yeah, if you replace everything about yourself with something new, are you still yourself? And I argue yes, but other people argue no.
I also argue yes. I had a heated debate with one of my friends about this. Yeah, it's like being able to separate it. I like the way you put it. It's hard to see that line sometimes, because your mental illness affects every part of your life, right? And sometimes the things aren't because of your mental illness, So being able to see that is important, but also being able to control it, manage it a little bit better with medication is great, in my experience at least. I also want to briefly speak about non-compliance with treatment and bipolar disorder. Basically, a lot of people who have bipolar don't get help, and I think it's really important for us, in my experience at least, but I think it's crucial that you work with your doctor and your care team, basically. So I think that concludes this episode. There's a lot more that we could go on about, but if you guys like this episode, make sure to subscribe and do all the things that, whatever. So yeah, don't do meth, I guess.
Okay, that's good. Don't do meth, kids.
Yeah, don't do meth.
If you do meth, do it safely.
No, don't say that. Well, I mean,
we have to.
Okay, no, let's not get into that.
If you guys like this episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram at our1and3 podcast and to subscribe to us on whatever you're listening to.
It's important to note that we are not medical professionals, and we cannot diagnose anyone with a mental illness. We have both been diagnosed by medical professionals. Please contact your doctor if you are concerned about your mental well-being. This content should not be interpreted as medical advice. The evidence and resources will be in the description. Please investigate these for further information.